It was a typical Tuesday evening when the world I had built began to crumble. I remember the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of the TV in the background. My wife, Claire, had always been the light of my life, her laughter echoing through our small apartment, filling the spaces between us with warmth. We had shared countless moments, from lazy Sunday mornings to late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours. But that evening, as I walked into the living room, I felt an unfamiliar chill in the air. Claire was sitting on the couch, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes were glued to the screen, and she seemed lost in whatever world was unfolding before her. I called out to her, but she barely acknowledged my presence. A wave of unease washed over me, and I brushed it off as just another long day at work. I had been busy with my own projects, and I figured she was just wrapped up in her latest obsession, some podcast she had discovered. Little did I know, it was more than just a passing interest. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I heard the familiar sound of notifications buzzing from her phone. My curiosity piqued. I glanced over to see her scrolling through messages. It was a moment of weakness, but I felt compelled to take a closer look. That's when I saw it, an exchange filled with flirtation, inside jokes, and an intimacy that didn't belong to me. My heart raced as I read the name that caused my stomach to drop like a stone. Jake Mercer, the famous podcaster whose voice had become a staple in our home. The realization hit me like a freight train. Claire was having an affair with a man who had built a career on connecting with people through his words, yet here I was, feeling utterly disconnected from the woman I thought I knew. My mind raced through the implications. How long had this been going on? Had I been blind to the signs? The late nights, the secretive smiles, the way she would suddenly become defensive if I asked about her phone. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. I confronted her, my voice shaky but resolute. "Claire, what's going on with you and Jake?" The question hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I watched as her face paled. The denial that followed was a gut punch. She stumbled through excuses, claiming it was all harmless fun, just a few flirty messages. But I knew better. I could see the guilt etched across her features. The emotional turmoil that ensued was a tempest. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of confusion, anger, and heartbreak. Claire had been my partner, my confidant, and now she was just a stranger who had shattered my trust. I replayed our memories together, questioning every moment, every laugh, every kiss. Had it all been a lie? I felt like a fool for believing in our love, for thinking we were invincible. As the days passed, I oscillated between rage and despair. I watched Claire go about her routines, seemingly unaffected, while I was a storm of emotions. I felt like I was living in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The love I had for her began to twist into something darker, something that craved retribution. I couldn't let this go unpunished. Jake Mercer had taken something sacred from me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to make him pay. But how? That's when the plan began to form in the back of my mind. I would expose him. I would ruin his career just as he had ruined my marriage. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control of my life. I was no longer the victim. I was going to make sure he understood the consequences of his actions. As I lay awake at night, plotting my next move, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. What I was considering was morally ambiguous, but the pain of betrayal clouded my judgment. I had to act. I had to make him suffer as I was suffering. The thought of Claire's face when she realized what I was doing fueled my determination. And so, the wheel of revenge began to turn. The days that followed my discovery were filled with a haze of anger and sorrow, but also a strange sense of purpose. Each morning, I woke up with the realization that my life had irrevocably changed. I had once felt secure in my relationship with Claire, but now it felt like a fragile facade, ready to crumble at any moment. I spent hours replaying our conversations, trying to decipher the moments where I should have seen the signs, her sudden need for privacy, her late-night phone calls that she would quickly hang up when I entered the room. I had been blind to the truth, and that stung more than the betrayal itself. Claire seemed to pick up on my mood, but instead of confronting it, she chose to act like everything was normal. She would cook dinner, ask about my day, and even attempt to initiate intimacy, but I felt like I was living with a ghost. The warmth between us had turned cold, and I could feel the distance growing wider. Each time she touched me, I recoiled, reminded of the betrayal. I was a man at war with his own emotions, and I needed an outlet for the storm brewing inside me. It was during one of these restless nights that I began to formulate my plan. I knew that Jake Mercer had a significant online presence, and with that came vulnerabilities. He had a reputation to uphold, and I could use that against him. My mind raced as I imagined all the ways I could expose him, from leaking his messages to creating a scandal that would tarnish his name. It was a dangerous game I was playing, but I felt justified. This was about more than revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I started by doing my research. I learned everything I could about Jake, his career, his podcast, his social media presence. I found out about his upcoming events and the loyal following he had built over the years. He was adored by many, and that made the prospect of tearing him down all the more appealing. The more I learned, the more I could see how easily his public image could be shattered. Late one night, I found myself scrolling through his podcast's social media page, reading through comments and fan interactions. It was then that I noticed a pattern. Many fans idolized him, but there were also whispers of controversies that had been swept under the rug. I felt a surge of excitement. If I could find a way to amplify those whispers, to bring them to light, I could disrupt his empire. The thought filled me with a sense of power I hadn't felt in days. As I plotted my course of action, I wrestled with the moral implications of what I was about to do. Was I really prepared to ruin a man's life over my own pain? I struggled with the idea of being the villain in my own story. But every time I thought of Claire's betrayal, the anger overshadowed any guilt I felt. I convinced myself that I was simply delivering justice, that I was making sure he understood the damage he had done. I began to draft an anonymous email, carefully crafting my words to expose Jake. I included snippets of the messages I had found, the flirtation that had crossed the line into something far more damaging. I knew I had to be cautious. I couldn't let it backfire on me. I had to remain in the shadows, pulling the strings while keeping my identity hidden. The email was just the beginning. I decided to reach out to a few online forums where fans discussed his podcast. I planted seeds of doubt, sharing my story in a way that hinted at his unprofessional behavior without revealing too much. I watched as the conversations began to shift. People were intrigued and the whispers grew louder. It was intoxicating, watching the chaos unfold from behind the scenes. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself grappling with the weight of my actions. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. The anger that had once fueled my resolve was now mingling with a nagging sense of regret. I had wanted to expose Jake, to ruin him, but I was also hurting Claire in the process. I could see the toll it was taking on her, her anxiety, her sleepless nights, her attempts to reach out to me. Yet I felt trapped. I had set this plan in motion, and to back out now would mean accepting her betrayal without consequence. The conflict within me raged on, a battle between the desire for revenge and the remnants of the love I still held for my wife. Every time I looked at Claire, I was reminded of the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared. But those dreams felt tainted now, overshadowed by her infidelity. The emotional turmoil had taken root deep within me, and I was no longer sure what I wanted. Was it revenge, or was it closure? As I continued down this dark path, I couldn't help but wonder how far I was willing to go. The stakes were rising, and with each passing day, I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. The thrill of revenge began to morph into an obsession. Each time I opened my laptop, I found myself diving deeper into the world of Jake Mercer. I followed him on social media, listened to his podcast episodes, and kept tabs on his public appearances. Every detail I gathered felt like ammunition, and I was determined to use it to dismantle the life he had built at my expense. The more I delved into his world, the more I understood the power dynamics at play. Jake was not just a podcaster. He was a brand, and brands could be broken. The moment I hit send on that first anonymous email was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had crossed a line, but the rush of taking action overshadowed any guilt. I watched as the fallout from my actions began to ripple through the online community. Fans were questioning Jake's integrity, and speculation about his personal life began to circulate. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, and I was the puppeteer pulling the strings, but with each passing day, the thrill started to wane. I found myself questioning my motivations. Was this really about revenge, or was I trying to fill a void left by Claire's betrayal? I started to feel the weight of the consequences. I was hurting not just Jake, but Claire, too. She was oblivious to the storm I was unleashing upon her lover, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a web of my own making. My inner monologue became a battleground. Part of me wanted to confront Claire, to discuss what had happened, but I was terrified of what that would mean. How could I face her when I was actively trying to ruin someone else's life? The moral ambiguity of my actions gnawed at me. I had painted myself as the hero in my own story, but I was becoming something darker, someone driven by pain rather than justice. One evening, I found myself sitting across from Claire at dinner, the silence thick and suffocating. She was trying to engage me in conversation, but I could see the worry etched on her face. It was as if she could sense the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to scream to tell her what I was doing, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a smile, pretending that everything was fine. "Are you okay?" she finally asked, her voice laced with concern. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, avoiding her gaze. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but the truth was that I was anything but okay. I was consumed by the anger that had become my constant companion. I began to fantasize about the moment when I would finally confront Jake. I imagined him realizing that his world was crumbling because of me, that he would be stripped of his fame and adoration. The thought filled me with a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. Then came the day when I discovered something that would change everything. While researching Jake's past, I stumbled upon an article detailing a controversy from years ago. He had been involved in a scandal that had nearly derailed his career, accusations of inappropriate behavior with fans. It was the perfect piece of information to exploit. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I realized I could use this to amplify the damage I was already causing. I crafted a new email, weaving together the past and present, and sent it to several media outlets. I painted a picture of a man who was not just a charming podcaster, but someone who had a history of crossing boundaries. I had become a ghost, lurking in the shadows, orchestrating a symphony of destruction. As I pressed send, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. I knew I was crossing a line, but the thrill of taking control of my narrative was intoxicating. In the days that followed, the fallout was immediate and explosive. Articles began to surface, and social media erupted with discussions about Jake's past. His fans were divided. Some defended him, while others expressed outrage. I watched it all unfold from a distance, my heart racing as I realized the extent of what I had set in motion. But with each article published, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming something I didn't recognize. I had wanted to hurt Jake, to make him suffer, but I was also hurting Claire in the process. I could see her distress growing as the news reached her. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, and I felt like I was spiraling out of control. One night, as I lay in bed next to Claire, I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the chaos I had unleashed. The contrast between her tranquility and my internal turmoil was jarring. I had wanted revenge, but I hadn't anticipated the emotional toll it would take on me. I was losing sight of my own humanity, and I had to ask myself, was this really what I wanted? The answer was becoming increasingly elusive. I felt like I was trapped in a cycle of anger and revenge, and no matter how much I tried to justify my actions, I couldn't escape the reality that I was tearing apart the fabric of my own life. I had become the architect of my own misery, and as I lay there, I knew I had to confront the consequences of my actions. With the walls closing in around me, I realized I was at a crossroads. Revenge had consumed me, but it was time to decide what was truly important. I had to confront Claire, to face her with the truth, and to reveal the darkness I had been nurturing inside. The moment of confrontation arrived sooner than I had anticipated. I had spent countless nights wrestling with the decision, but as the sun set one evening, illuminating our living room with a warm glow, I knew it was time to face Claire. She was sitting on the couch, absorbed in a book, and for a moment I hesitated, wondering if I could actually go through with it. But the weight of my silence had become unbearable and the truth was clawing its way to the surface. "Claire," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me, "we need to talk." Her eyes flicked up from the pages, concern etched on her face. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "It's about Jake." Her expression shifted from curiosity to fear, and I could see her heart race as she braced herself for what I was about to reveal. "What about him?" I felt a surge of anger mixed with vulnerability. "I know about the affair, Claire. I saw the messages." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. I watched as her face fell, the color draining from her cheeks. She stammered, clearly caught off guard. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Didn't mean for me to find out." I interrupted, my voice rising. "You're sleeping with a man who has built a career on charm and deception, and you think it's okay to brush it off." Her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the guilt washing over her. "I made a mistake, and I regret it. But please, let's talk about this. I never wanted to hurt you." I felt a mix of anger and sympathy, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. "You hurt me, Claire, but it's not just about that. I've been doing some digging on Jake, and I've uncovered some things that could ruin him." The realization dawned on her, and her expression shifted from sorrow to alarm. "What do you mean? What have you done?" "I've sent emails to some media outlets about his past, about the accusations against him. I'm not going to let him get away with this." The words spilled out, and I could feel the satisfaction of my revenge bubbling up, but alongside it came a wave of doubt. "Are you serious?" she exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "You're going to ruin his life for what? Because he made a mistake with me? Because he took what was mine?" I shot back, the anger boiling over. "You were mine, Claire. We had a life together, and he waltzed in and took it away." "But this isn't just about you," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "This is about me too. I made a choice and I regret it. But ruining Jake isn't going to fix anything. It's only going to make things worse." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, and for a moment I was at a loss. I had been so consumed by my need for revenge that I hadn't considered the fallout. The anger that had fueled my actions began to dissipate, replaced by a creeping sense of doubt. Was I really willing to destroy a man's life over my own pain? "I don't want to hurt you, Claire," I said, my voice softer now. "But I can't just sit back and let this happen. You betrayed me." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I did, and I'm so sorry. But please don't do this. It won't bring you peace. It will only bring more pain." I looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of sincerity, any hint that this was more than just regret. The love I had for her battled against the anger that had driven me to this point. I could see the woman I had fallen in love with, but I also saw the betrayal that had shattered our bond. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had wanted revenge, but now I was faced with the possibility of forgiveness. Could I let go of the anger? Could I forgive her and move forward? "Maybe I can't ruin his life," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't just forget what happened. I need time to figure out what I want." Claire nodded, relief washing over. "Teachers, I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I love you and I want to fix this." Her words cut through the turmoil in my heart. Did I still love her? The answer was complicated, tangled in betrayal and hurt. But as I sat there watching her, I realized that the path forward wouldn't be easy. I had to confront my own demons, the need for revenge that had consumed me, and the pain that had driven me to act out. In the days that followed, I wrestled with my decision. I had pulled back from my plan against Jake, but the urge to expose him still lingered in the back of my mind. I knew I had to find a way to heal, to forgive not just Claire but also myself. I began to seek help, talking to a therapist about my feelings of betrayal and anger. It was a daunting step, but I knew I couldn't navigate this alone. As I started to unpack my emotions, I began to realize that revenge wasn't the answer. It wouldn't heal the wounds that had been inflicted. I had to confront my feelings directly, too. Allow myself to grieve the loss of the relationship I thought I had. But despite my efforts to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake would still be a part of our lives, a shadow lurking in the background. I had to confront him eventually, but I needed to do it on my terms, not driven by anger but by a desire to reclaim my life. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to find a way to heal. I had to redefine my relationship with Claire, and that meant letting go of the need for revenge. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a step toward finding peace amidst the chaos. As the weeks passed, I found myself navigating the complex emotions that accompanied healing. I had made the decision to step back from my vengeful plans against Jake, but the remnants of anger and betrayal still lingered like a shadow over my life. Claire and I began to communicate more openly, but the trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was fragile. Each conversation felt like walking on eggshells, and I struggled to reconcile the love I still had for her. With the pain she had caused, I began attending therapy sessions regularly, hoping to untangle the knot of emotions that had formed in my chest. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Simmons, encouraged me to express my feelings rather than bottle them up. Anger is a natural response to betrayal, she told me one afternoon. But holding on to that anger can be toxic. You need to find a way to process it to understand what you truly want moving forward. Her words resonated with me. I had spent so much time focused on revenge that I had neglected to consider what I really wanted for myself. I realized that my desire to expose Jake was rooted in a need for validation, a way to reclaim my sense of power after feeling so powerless in Claire's betrayal. But as I began to reflect on my motivations, I understood that revenge would not bring the closure I sought. Instead, it would only perpetuate the cycle of pain. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, I sat down with Claire to have an honest conversation. We were at a crossroads, and I knew that if we were going to rebuild our relationship, we needed to address the elephant in the room, Jake. I've been thinking a lot about my feelings, I began, choosing my words carefully, about what happened between you and Jake. Claire looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. And I've realized that I can't keep holding on to this anger. It's not helping either of us. I don't want to be consumed by revenge anymore. I want to focus on us. Her relief was palpable, and I could see the tension in her shoulders ease. Thank you for saying that. I don't want to fight anymore. I want to move forward together. But as we talked, I also felt the weight of Jake's presence looming over us. I had to confront him, not out of anger but to reclaim my sense of self. I needed to understand why he had crossed a line and how I could find closure in this chaotic situation. Over the next few days, I gathered my thoughts and decided to reach out to Jake. I didn't want to expose him. I wanted to confront him directly, to express how his actions had affected my life and my marriage. I crafted a carefully worded email, one that was firm but not hostile. I wanted him to understand the impact of his choices without descending into a petty feud. Jake, I typed, my fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. I know about your relationship with Claire. I want you to understand that your actions have consequences, not just for you but for others. I'm not interested in ruining your career, but I need you to know that what you did has hurt me deeply. I hesitated before hitting send. This was a turning point, a moment where I could reclaim my narrative without resorting to revenge. I wanted to confront him and express my pain, but I also wanted to demonstrate that I was choosing a different path, one of healing rather than destruction. Once I sent the email, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I had taken control of my situation, and I was ready to face whatever response came my way. I knew Jake would likely be defensive, but I also hoped that he would take my words to heart. Days passed and I received no reply. I couldn't decide if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Part of me wanted to hear his side of the story, but another part of me was relieved that I wouldn't have to engage in a back and forth about blame and guilt. I was done with that cycle. In the meantime, Claire and I continued to work on our relationship. We went on walks, spent quiet evenings together, and even sought couples therapy. It was challenging, but I could feel the cracks in our foundation beginning to mend. We were learning to communicate openly, and I could see Claire's determination to rebuild the trust we had lost. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, Claire turned to me with a serious expression. "Have you heard anything from Jake?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "No, and honestly, I'm okay with that," I replied, feeling a newfound sense of peace. "I think I've said everything I needed to say. I want to focus on us now." She smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I want that too. I want to make this work, and I'm committed to doing whatever it takes." Her words filled me with warmth, and for the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of hope. We were embarking on a new journey together, one that required vulnerability and honesty. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was willing to face them head-on. But just as I began to settle into this new phase of our relationship, I received an unexpected response from Jake. It came in the form of a direct message on social media, and my heart raced as I opened it. "Hey, I got your email. I didn't know you were aware of my relationship with Claire. I never intended to hurt you or anyone else. I'm sorry for what happened, and I hope you can find some peace." His words were simple, yet they struck a chord. I could feel the weight of his apology, but it wasn't enough to erase the hurt. I realized then that closure wouldn't come from Jake's acknowledgement of his actions. It had to come from within me. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I prepared to respond. I didn't want to engage in a lengthy back and forth, but I felt it was important to acknowledge his message. "Thank you for your response, Jake. I appreciate your apology. I hope we can all learn from this experience and move forward." As I hit send, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had confronted my demons, expressed my pain, and taken steps toward healing. It was time to let go of the past and embrace the future, whatever it may hold. With that, I turned to Claire, who was watching me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What did he say?" she asked softly. "He apologized," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "But I think the most important thing is that I'm ready to move on. We both need to focus on us now." Claire smiled, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you. Let's take this journey together." And with that, we began to forge a new path, a path of healing, forgiveness, and love. The road ahead would be uncertain, but I was ready to face it, hand in hand with the woman I still loved. As I sat in the quiet of our living room, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The storm that had raged inside me for so long was finally beginning to settle. Claire and I had taken significant steps toward mending our relationship, and though the scars of betrayal would always be there, I was starting to believe that healing was possible. In the weeks that followed, we continued our journey together, attending therapy sessions and having open, honest discussions about our feelings. We explored the depths of our pain, but we also celebrated the small victories of rebuilding trust. I learned to communicate my feelings without resentment, and Claire worked hard to show me that she was committed to making amends. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Claire leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed contentedly. "I'm so grateful for this second chance," she said softly. "I know I messed up, but I want to prove to you that I can be the partner you deserve." I turned to her, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I appreciate that, Claire. I'm learning to let go of the anger, and it feels good. I want us to move forward together, but it's going to take time." "I'm willing to put in the effort," she replied, looking into my eyes with sincerity. "I love you, and I don't want to lose you again." As I held her close, I reflected on how far we had come. The road to healing wasn't linear, and there were still moments of doubt and insecurity. But I was beginning to understand that forgiveness wasn't a destination, it was a journey. I had to forgive Claire, but I also had to forgive myself for allowing anger and betrayal to consume me. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from Jake. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Hey, it's Jake," he said, his voice steady but slightly hesitant. "I wanted to reach out and talk about everything that's happened." I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Okay," I replied cautiously. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued. "I never intended to hurt either of you. I got caught up in something that I shouldn't have been involved in. I'm sorry for the pain I caused." His apology was sincere, and I could hear the weight of remorse in his voice. "I appreciate you reaching out, Jake. It's taken me some time to process everything, but I'm learning to let go of the anger. I hope you can find peace," he said quietly. "I'm working on being a better person, too." As we spoke, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I realized that holding onto anger would only continue to hurt me. I had taken control of my narrative, confronted my demons, and now I was ready to move forward without the burden of revenge. After our conversation, I shared the details with Claire. I spoke with Jake. I told her, watching her reaction closely. He apologized, and I think he's genuinely trying to make amends. She nodded thoughtfully. "That's good to hear. It sounds like he's taking responsibility for his actions. I think it's time for us to focus on what matters most us," I said firmly. "I want to put this behind us and work toward a healthier future." As we moved forward, we began to explore new experiences together. We took weekend trips, tried new hobbies, and spent time with friends. We were rediscovering each other, and it felt exhilarating. The laughter that had once filled our home began to return, and with it came a sense of hope. But I also knew that the journey wouldn't be without its challenges. There would still be moments of doubt and insecurity, but I was committed to facing them head-on. I had learned that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness, and I wanted to create a safe space where we could both express our feelings openly. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Claire and said, "I know we still have a long way to go, but I believe in us. I believe in our ability to heal and grow together." She smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "I believe in us too. I'm grateful for the chance to rebuild what we lost." As I looked out at the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, but it was the love I had for Claire that had ultimately guided me through the storm. I was ready to embrace the future, no longer haunted by the past. In the end, I realized that life was not just about the moments of betrayal and heartache. It was also about the resilience to rise above them. I had learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness, and I was determined to carry those lessons with me as we embarked on this new chapter together. The journey ahead would be filled with uncertainty, but I felt hopeful. I had reclaimed my narrative, and I was ready to write the next chapter of our lives, one filled with love, understanding, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as I held Claire close, I knew that together, we could face anything life threw our way.